The morning air in the royal courtyard of Arvante felt cool and sharp, like it had been dipped in steel. The sun had not fully climbed above the walls, and faint ribbons of light slipped across the flagstones. Servants whispered and hurried about, trying not to show their excitement. Today was not a day of ceremony or trade. It was the day of a duel. Princess Lyra of Arvante stood in the open space, wearing a fitted jacket of dark blue and high boots polished until they shone. She held a slender sword in her right hand and tapped the blade gently against her boot while she waited. Her hair was tied back, and the tilt of her chin carried the pride of someone who had never been defeated. Lyra loved challenges. She also loved proving she was better at them than anyone else. Across the courtyard, a stranger stepped into view. He was taller than most of the guards and built with the quiet strength of someone who worked with his hands. He had brown hair in disarray and eyes that seemed to watch everything without hurry. His clothing was simple, a light shirt and worn gloves. He bowed to the princess with an air that was polite but unbothered. This man was Ethan Cole, an envoy from the frontier provinces. Rumor had it, he had come not for politics, but to test his skill against Arvante's finest swordswoman. No one had expected him to be bold enough to challenge the princess herself. Yet here he was, calm as a mountain, standing before royalty with nothing but his sword and steady breath. The courtiers, who watched from behind the marble pillars, began to murmur. Some whispered that the man had no idea what he had gotten himself into. Others hoped the match would at least last a few minutes before Lyra's blade sent him to his knees. Lyra looked him over. "You're sure you understand the rules, Mr. Cole?" she said, her voice smooth but edged with amusement. "This duel ends when one of us yields or loses the sword." "I understand," Ethan answered simply, his tone soft but sure. Lyra smiled in that way nobles do when they believe they already know the end of the story. "Good. Try to keep up then. You'll be finished in a minute, human." The crowd gave a light gasp at her bold words. But Ethan only smiled faintly. "A minute? I'll do my best not to disappoint, princess." The signal horn sounded. Lyra moved first, as swift as a flash of silver in the pale sunlight. Her strikes came clean, confident, rehearsed from years of lessons since childhood. She fought like one who had always been told she was perfect. Ethan parried each blow with the patience of someone used to earning his victories a harder way. He stepped back once, twice, letting her press. When she lunged high, he dipped low. When she tried to circle him, he changed his footing, light and precise, as if he already knew where she would move next. Her next attack cut through the empty air as Ethan sidestepped and caught her rhythm. He never struck to harm. He seemed to learn her movements as though they were steps to a slow dance. The watchers began to lean forward. Something about his calm unsettled them. Lyra's brow wrinkled. No one had lasted this long against her. She struck again, faster now, trying to force a mistake. Ethan deflected every swing, using the ground's uneven cobblestones to shift the angle of her approach. The clang of metal filled the courtyard. Sparks rose like fireflies around their boots. "Not bad," she said through her breathless grin. "I could say the same," he replied, steady as ever. When she tried a final rush, meant to end the duel, he caught her sword on his own and turned it, his strength not brute, but practiced. The move brought both blades to a halt, crossed close between them. For a moment their eyes met, and something electric flickered in the air aspect. Surprise, maybe even a hint of curiosity. Neither moved. Every courtier held their breath. The match had reached an invisible line neither could cross without changing more than just the outcome of a fight. Then, slowly, they both stepped back, lowering their swords at the same time. The horn sounded again, not for victory, but for peace. Princess Lyra blinked once, then laughed softly. It was not the mocking kind this time. Her pride was still there, but beneath it was a spark of admiration. "You're better than you look, Mr. Cole." Ethan nodded, still smiling. "You too, princess." The crowd broke into chatter. Some clapped, others argued about who had really won. But the two duelists barely noticed. Something wordless had passed between them, an understanding that this morning duel was not the end of anything. It was the start of something new and far more interesting. The sun finally rose fully over the walls, golden light spilling into the courtyard as if the world itself approved of that quiet. Unexpected tie between pride and humility, crown and commoner, challenge and change. Ethan Cole had not been in the royal court for long, but everyone in the palace already spoke about him. Some said he was lucky. Others whispered he had used trickery. But no one could deny what had happened in that courtyard. Princess Lyra, the undefeated swordmaster of Arvanthe, had met someone who did not fall to her blade. Lyra herself could not stop thinking about that morning. She tried to tell herself it did not matter, that the duel had been just another test of skill. Yet something about the calm way Ethan had fought stayed in her mind. He had not been angry or proud. It looked as if he was reading her every move, not out of arrogance, but out of careful study. When she passed the training yard later that day, she saw her soldiers trying to copy some of Ethan's movements, tripping over their own feet. She shook her head, half amused, half irritated. "So this is what one fight does to morale," she muttered. But deep down, a tiny part of her wanted to know more about the man who had unsettled her so completely. By the next morning, curiosity overcame pride. Lyra went to the small workshop near the western docks, where the foreign envoy was said to spend his time. The place smelled of oil and warm metal. Cogs, gears, and strange tools lay scattered over a heavy wooden table. Ethan was there, sleeves rolled up, working on a metallic frame shaped somewhat like a small flying machine. Sparks flew as he tightened a bolt and turned a crank. He looked up only when her boots tapped lightly on the floor behind him. "Your Highness," he said, cheerful but not formal. "You didn't bring a sword this time. I take that as a good sign." Lyra smiled faintly. "I came to see what sort of man builds a machine and fights a princess all in the same week." He shrugged, wiping grease from his hands. "Both are puzzles. Machines and people work on rhythm. You watch long enough, and you begin to see what makes them move." She tilted her head. "You talk like a philosopher. I just pay attention," he said, turning another gear. The machine whirred softly, little blades spinning above it. Lyra leaned closer, curious. "Does it fly?" "Not yet," he said. "But the day one of these stays in the air is the day our world grows smaller and our dreams larger." "How?" She smiled in surprise. "You speak like a dreamer, and you duel like one," he said, with that same calm humor that had made her both annoyed and fascinated during their fight. For a moment, silence filled the room, except for the low hum of the machine. Lyra looked around. "You work with your own hands. Not many nobles do." "I'm no noble," Ethan replied, "but I've built air pumps, harvest wheels, and once an oven that caught fire before it baked bread. You learn by failing. Sometimes failing teaches faster than winning." Lyra thought of her years of lessons, her many victories, and the comfort of always being praised. "You make failure sound noble." "It is," Ethan said simply. "Failure means you tried." The princess studied him carefully. He was not charming in the way courtmen were trained to be, but his quiet confidence unsettled her. He had no title, yet he spoke with the strength of someone who needed none. Before she could answer, a guard burst through the doorway and bowed quickly. "Your Highness, the council asks for you. Generals are waiting. There is talk of unrest near the northern border." Lyra turned to leave, but paused. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Cole." He nodded. "Anytime, Princess." Later that day, as she sat in the council hall, was listening to gray-haired generals argue about maps and borders, her mind kept drifting back to the workshop. While they debated over rules and rank, she remembered Ethan talking about rhythm, failure, and dreams. For the first time in her life, she began to wonder if there was a world beyond the one she had always defended with her sword. That night, she walked through the empty courtyard where she had fought him. The moon was high, and the stones still held the faint marks of their duel. She traced one with her boot, remembering the clang of steel in his calm eyes. Something inside her shifted. Perhaps strength was not only about speed or skill. Perhaps it also meant knowing when to listen, when to learn. She looked up at the stars, bright against the dark sky. Somewhere out there, a man was building a flying machine out of scraps and courage. And for reasons she did not fully understand, the thought made her smile. Far across the city, Ethan wiped the grease from his hands, stepped out of his workshop, and looked toward the glowing lights of the palace. He did not know that the princess was thinking of him, or that his words had stirred something in the heart of royalty. He only knew that tomorrow he would keep building, keep trying, and maybe, just maybe, show the world that a single determined human could change everything. Ethan woke early the next morning. The city was still quiet, the sky a pale silver, and smoke from chimneys drifted lazily through the air. He stood outside his workshop, listening to the distant bells of the palace and thinking about the princess. He had not expected to see her again after the duel, yet she had come to visit him. Her questions had been sharp, her curiosity honest. It was strange how someone raised behind marble walls looked at his tools as if they were stars. He smiled slightly as he remembered her expression when the small machine had begun to hum. Few people at court looked at invention with wonder. Most saw only danger and change. But she had looked like someone who wanted to understand how the world truly worked, not how it was supposed to. At almost the same hour, Princess Lyra stood by her balcony, tying back her hair. Below her, the palace gardens glowed with dew, but her mind was far from their beauty. The council had gone on arguing long into the night. Some wanted war with the northern provinces. Others wanted new trade with them. None listened to the ideas of anyone outside the noble houses. Lyra felt trapped. All her life, she had been told that royal duty meant protecting tradition. But what if tradition was part of the problem? Ethan's words about failure and invention kept circling in her mind. Failure means you tried. It sounded simple, yet it carried more courage than any order the council had ever given. Later that day, when her duties finished, she slipped out of the palace in a plain cape and went down to the docks again. She found Ethan where she had left him, bending over that strange flying frame. He looked up and blinked in surprise. "Your Highness, you returned sooner than I expected," he said. "I needed some air," she answered, brushing dust from her cloak. "Perhaps a lesson of a different kind." "A lesson," he repeated. "Teach me about this," she said, pointing to the half-finished machine. "I've trained with blades all my life, but I know nothing about gears." Ethan laughed quietly. "Learning this will ruin your gloves. Then I will ruin them," she replied, serious but smiling. So he showed her, explained how the wings had to be shaped, how metal bent if you heated it too fast, how every little bolt mattered. She held the tools clumsily at first, but soon her steady hands found rhythm. He guided her, step by step, never speaking down to her. They worked until the sun slipped low and golden through the windows. When they finally stopped, her hair was loose, and her gloves were indeed ruined. But her face glowed with a kind of joy she had not felt in years. "You learn fast," he said, setting aside the hammer. "I had a good teacher," she replied. They stood in silence for a moment. Outside, the city lights flickered on, and the voices of dock workers rose and fell like the tide. Lyra looked at him and said quietly, "I think the kingdom is changing. People want more than the same words from the same men. They want ideas, hope, something new." Ethan nodded slowly. "Change scares those who already have everything to lose, but it gives courage to those who have nothing left to wait for." Lyra thought about that for a long moment. "If we work together," she said finally, "I think we could build more than just a machine." He raised an eyebrow. "I mean, what kind of work exactly?" She took a deep breath. "The council has no plans for peace with the North. Only threats. Dies. But maybe a device like this could carry messages faster than horses. Maybe we could stop fighting if we could talk sooner." Ethan stared at her, a little stunned. "You would risk their anger for that?" She nodded. "If it might save lives, yes." He looked at her then with the same calm eyes he had in the duel, but now there was respect in the quiet. "Then I'll help you," he said. For many nights after that, they built together in secret. She came dressed in plain clothes, bringing food and parchment. He brought spare parts in his patience. They argued, they laughed, and sometimes they just worked in silence while the city slept. Little by little, the machine took shape. Its wings stretched like the arms of a dream. When it finally turned under its own power, trembling but steady, they both stepped back. Neither spoke. Both knew they had made something extraordinary. Lyra touched the side of the machine softly. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Ethan smiled. "It's only a beginning." That night, when she returned to her chambers, Lyra stood by the window again. She looked out over the sleeping city and thought of everything that could change, if people were brave enough to believe in something bigger than fear. In the quiet, she whispered to herself, almost without noticing, "You'll be finished in a minute, human." Then she laughed softly, because now she knew how wrong those words had been. Some people were not finished at all. Some people had only just begun to build the impossible. Ethan and Princess Lyra worked for many weeks in secret after their first success. Each night they met in the workshop near the western docks, careful not to draw attention. The flying machine was almost ready now. It was larger, smoother, and stronger than before. The frame gleamed under the glow of small oil lamps, and the smell of hot metal filled the air. Lyra had changed too. The proud tone that once echoed in her voice was softer. She still carried her strength, but now it was mixed with patience. She no longer gave orders. She asked and listened. Working beside Ethan had shown her a world beyond the throne and its golden duties. One evening, as she adjusted one of the small wings, Ethan said quietly, "When we finish this, what will you do with it?" She paused. "If it flies, it will prove that we don't need endless wars. We'll show that people can build bridges, not just walls. Maybe the council will see that." He gave a low laugh. "Some men see proof and still turn away." "Then we must make it impossible to ignore," she said. But not everyone liked the whispers that reached the palace. Rumors spread of the princess spending late hours among machines and commoners. The guards talked, the servants wondered, and the council grew restless. They said it was improper for a royal to mix with workers, dangerous even. The Queen Mother, a firm and proud woman, sent a message for Lyra to appear before the council. That next morning, Lyra stood in the large stone chamber beneath tall stained glass. The councilmen sat in a row, gray-haired and heavy with titles. Her mother sat at the far end, eyes sharp. "Daughter," she said, her voice calm but cold. "We hear strange things. They say you spend your nights away from the palace." "It is true," Lyra said, keeping her back straight. "I have been working on something that could help our people." One of the councilmen frowned. "A princess playing engineer? You insult your station?" "I'm not playing," Lyra answered quickly. "We're building a craft that can move faster than any horse. If we can send messages across borders, we can end battles before they start." A heavy silence followed. The Queen Mother's expression did not change. "With whom have you been working?" Lyra hesitated only a moment. "With Ethan Cole, the envoy from the frontier." Murmurs filled the hall. One of the councilmen slammed his hand on the table. "A man with no title, no bloodline, and no right to guide a royal. This is dangerous talk. You risk the kingdom's image." Lyra felt heat rise in her chest. "The kingdom's image will not matter if it is burned in war. Ethan's work can save lives." The Queen Mother's gaze softened for only a second. "You are my daughter, and your heart is brave. But bravery without wisdom can destroy all it tries to protect. Return to your duties, Lyra. Leave this engineer to his dreams." Lyra left the hall with her jaw clenched. She knew they would not stop her with words. That night, she went back to the workshop. When she told Ethan what had happened, he nodded quietly. "They fear what they don't understand," he said. "All old powers do. We can't stop," she said firmly. "The test flight must happen soon. If it works, no one can deny us." So they worked faster, their hands moving with purpose. The days blurred together. Outside, clouds gathered, hinting at a coming storm. Inside, the two builders hammered, tightened, and polished until every part fit perfectly. The hum of progress drowned out their worry. Finally, the day came.
The air was heavy and still.
They wheeled the machine out onto the open field beyond the docks. The sky was filled with dark clouds, but flashes of sun broke through like silver fire. Lyra stood beside Ethan, her cloak snapping in the wind. "Are you ready?" he asked. She drew a slow breath. "Always." He climbed into the seat and checked the levers. The small wings trembled. The sound of the engine rose louder and louder until even the seabirds fell silent. The craft rolled forward, bumping across the dirt faster and faster. Then, to Lyra's disbelief, it lifted. Not high, not long, but it flew. The sight stole her breath. The machine wobbled, dipped, then steadied. Ethan laughed out loud as he held the control steady. For several long seconds it soared above the ground before touching down again. Lyra ran toward him, her heart thundering. Out! He stepped out, sweat on his forehead, eyes bright with joy. She threw her arms around him before she could stop herself. "We did it," she breathed. "It actually flew." Ethan smiled. "It's only a few seconds, but enough. Enough to prove it can be done." Far behind them on the hill, 2 soldiers had seen everything. Without a word, one turned his horse toward the palace to carry the news. Neither Ethan nor Lyra noticed. They were both laughing under the fading sky, unaware that their small victory would soon shake the entire kingdom. The morning after the flight, the kingdom of Arvanthe buzzed like a shaken wasp's nest. The report had spread faster than rumor ever had before. The princess had built a machine that flew, they said. Common man, Ethan Cole, had helped her do it. Together they had challenged centuries of old pride and proven that something new could rise from honest hands. At the palace, meetings began before sunrise. Angry voices echoed through the halls. The Queen Mother demanded calm, but calm was no longer possible. The council wanted the machine taken apart, the workshop closed, and Ethan sent back to the frontier. They claimed it was for safety, but everyone knew it was fear. Inside the workshop, Lyra and Ethan waited for word, their machine gleaming quietly in the center like a sleeping dream. Neither spoke much. The flight had proven the idea, but it also meant trouble. When the sound of guards filled the street outside, Ethan looked up. "Seems our visitors have arrived early," he said. Lyra's face was pale but steady. "Let them come," she said. "I will not hide." The Queen Mother entered soon after, followed by 2 advisors and several guards. She looked around the workshop, her sharp eyes taking in the scattered tools, the smell of oil, the shining metal wings. "So this is what has captured your heart, daughter," she said quietly. A machine made of noise and smoke. Lyra stepped forward. "It's more than a machine. It's proof that the future doesn't have to be chained to the past." The Queen Mother sighed. "You always did have your father's stubborn heart. But you must understand, Lyra, the council believes this experiment is dangerous. They fear you risked your life and the honor of the crown for something uncertain." Ethan spoke then, calm but firm. "With respect, Your Majesty, the greatest danger is refusing to move forward. This invention is not rebellion. It's hope." The Queen Mother turned to him, searching his face. "What do you gain from giving my daughter these ideas, Mr. Cole?" He did not flinch. "Nothing you can weigh in gold or title, only the chance to help her change the world." For a moment no one spoke. The Queen Mother's eyes softened, just slightly. "Hope is a sharp blade, Mr. Cole. It can cut both ways." But before she could continue, a soldier rushed in. "Your Majesty," he said breathlessly, "the Northern Army crosses the valley. Scouts say they will reach the border within 2 days." The Queen Mother's face hardened. "So it begins," she murmured. Lyra looked at Ethan, realizing at once what had to be done. "We'll take the machine," she said. "We can reach the front faster than riders. We can warn the generals before the enemy surrounds them." The Queen Mother frowned. "The thing cannot carry 2 across the plains." "It can," Ethan said quickly, "if we lighten the load." The Queen Mother stared at them both. "You are mad," she said, but her voice trembled. "If it fails, you'll fall." "Then we will fall trying," Lyra replied. "Better than standing still while others die." Minutes later, the workshop became a storm of movement. Mechanics and soldiers filled the open yard as word spread. The machine was carried out again, its silver frame shining under the late sun. The sky was clear and endless. Lyra and Ethan worked fast, tightening ropes and checking flaps. When it was ready, Lyra climbed into the seat behind Ethan. The Queen Mother watched from the wall, her hands clasped tight. "Be careful, my child," she called. Lyra looked back at her mother, eyes full of quiet fire. "We'll be finished in a minute," she said with a small smile, "and that minute will change everything." Then Ethan threw the throttle forward. The engine roared, the ground blurred, and the machine lifted from the earth, rising higher, steadier, faster. The crowd below burst into shouts and gasps. The Queen's banner fluttered wildly in the wind as her daughter vanished into the sky. Over the plains, they flew. The sun burned gold on the horizon. From that height, Lyra could see the world as she never had before the rivers. The fields, the distant campfires of soldiers, waiting for a fight. For the first time, she felt truly free. Ethan guided the craft carefully, shouting over the wind, "Look, the ridge." He pointed to a narrow line where smoke rose faintly. "That's them," Lyra said. We must make them see us before it's too late. The machine swooped low, circling above the camps. Soldiers below pointed upward, shouting in disbelief. A few moments later, horns echoed across the valley, signaling retreat before the enemy could trap them. The message was carried. The battle that should have begun never did. When they landed again at the border field, tired and covered in dust, Lyra turned to Ethan, laughing with relief. "We did it," she said. "We changed something real." He smiled back at her. "You did?" "I only helped you believe it was possible." That evening, when they returned to Arvanthe, the crowd lined the streets, cheering their names. The Queen Mother met them at the palace gates, eyes shining with pride she no longer tried to hide. "You broke every rule I set," she said quietly, "and because of that, you saved us all." Lyra smiled through the wind still tangled in her hair. Sometimes rules must bend so that people can rise. Ethan stood beside her, silent but radiant. And above them, the sky stretched wide and bright, reminding them both that their story, the story that began with pride, challenge, and a careless taunt, had become a legend that would never stop flying.